if you can't even serve me sacrificially when we're dating and things are easy and fun, how in the world can I trust that you're going to serve me when it's been a long day? You worked, I worked, the kids were acting like kids, and we put them to bed, and now we got to clean up the kitchen. How can I trust that you're not going to leave me down here every night by myself? Like, I know this is getting super practical and in the weeds, but this is real life. What's up, fam? Welcome back to our channel. My name is Tim. This is my beautiful wife, Pauline, and you're tuning in to another episode of the W Podcast, where you get wisdom in the word with the
Wheelers.
Hey, so we are so excited to be back for another week. We have another topic, actually a question this week that we got from our Unlock Your Dream Relationship webinar last week. And we were like, this is so good. We want everybody that listens to our podcast to think about this question, answer it for themselves, and really figure out how to navigate this topic, and I'm really excited about that. Yeah. But you know what else I'm excited about? Do you know?
Yes.
What is it?
Does it start with a J?
JDU, or Just Dating University, if you don't know the acronym, is our course that we designed together to help singles and dating couples take the next step in their relationship, whether that's learning practical tools, biblical tools about how to date, because so many people say the Bible doesn't talk about dating. And yes, the word dating is not in the Bible, but there's actually so many principles that the Bible does speak on in regards to relationships that really apply to dating that you need to know. Yeah. And if you don't know them, your relationship is not going to be as strong as you want it to be. Right. So if you are interested and want to learn more about JDU, you can go to justdatinguniversity.com. If you're listening to this on the day this comes out, which is Tuesday, then that means enrollment closes tonight. Yeah. So you got all day to pray about it. Ask the Lord, is this what you want me to do? And because we truly believe, and forgive me, babe, if you... Surprise. We didn't talk about this, so if you don't like it, just say it. Because we strongly believe in praying and seeking the Lord, maybe you're not going to listen to this until Tuesday at 8 p.m. But you're like, I really want to take the night to pray about it. If you email us on Wednesday saying, hey, I prayed about it and I want to join JDU, we will let you be able to obey the Lord. So connect at justdating.com, right? Is that the right email?
No.
Oh, Lord, please.
Dating. Connect at We Are Just Dating.
Say it louder, they didn't hear you.
Connect at wearejustdating.com.
Connect at We Are Just Dating. It's at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, you done already seen that. So make sure you go ahead and email us if that is you. You're the late bloomer who wants to obey the Lord. And that's all we ask, really. If this even interests you remotely, pray about it. And if God says no, trust us. We don't want anybody that God don't want there. So we will be set, but we will be starting this week with JDU classes. Me and Pauline will be doing weekly. I know this is getting long. Pauline's probably like, let's go. But hey, this is my last shot to make sure the people can get in. We're going to be doing weekly courses inside of JDU where we walk you through each topic that we have for the duration of the course. So make sure you sign up if you're interested, and we hope to see you there. So I want you to read the question, but before that, if you love us and watch us on YouTube every week, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video, that goes a long way. So what's the question for this week? And you just not even... Where is it? Where is it?
I have
Too many tabs.
I know. So many, literally a perfect parallel to my brain, but I know others of you are the same way. Okay. The question is, what do you do if the person you are dating has a certain perception of the church and church people? I would like for him to visit with me at least once.
That's the question. It felt like it was some more there, but that's the question. What do you do if the person you're dating has a certain perception of the church and church people? And by the way, this means a negative perception because we don't want you to read into it. Well, what if their perception is good? Well, that's great.
You wouldn't be asking the question.
Right. This question is...
It's not even that's good. It's something that you agree with.
Right. If the person you're dating or talking to, maybe you just met them, or maybe you've been going on 4 or 5 dates. Maybe you're already boyfriend, girlfriend official, and for whatever reason, this topic hasn't come up yet. What do you do? Is that something you should care about, be concerned about, have a conversation about, even break up about. I know I went right there.
You can break about you. I told y'all, you can break up about anything technically.
Sure, and people do. But I think one of the things I want to say, this is actually a really important question. It may sound stupid, it may sound superficial, but the reason this is important is because you have to remember that the enemy wants to steal, kill, and destroy you. And that includes relationships. Relationships are part of your life, and it's no different. And I think sometimes there may be things that come up in dating relationships, especially when it comes to spiritual matters. And even sometimes everything technically is spiritual if we really want to go there. But something that can be spiritual, sometimes we may overlook it because we're like, oh, it's not that big deal. He says Jesus is real and he believes in Jesus, so church isn't that big a deal. But we don't realize that it's the little foxes, as the Bible says, that can really take over a relationship and make things worse. Because you've heard people say all the time, and if you haven't heard, there's a saying that says marriage is an amplifier. And little things that come up that you may be concerned about, you don't want to just ignore them. Now I'm just talking in general. I'm not even talking about church. I'm saying in general, if there's any little issues, it needs to be addressed because it could get bigger in marriage. What do you think when you hear this question, babe?
Yeah, well, what you're saying is really good because there's a lot of things. It's so easy when you're dating to kind of push small issues under the rug. And you probably are doing it in good faith or with good intention, thinking like, oh, I don't want to cause an argument, or because that's another thing, especially as women, learning like I don't want to be a nag, or I don't want to make make a mountain out of a molehill. That was something, I don't know if my mom said that growing up or something.
That is an old saying. Yeah. That's all I know.
Somebody said that growing up, or like crying over spilled milk, things like that. Because sometimes women, we do have a tendency to make a big deal out of things. And like, I don't even want to say nag or make a big deal out of things, but it's just, I think for me, it's more of just about working on my timing, of like knowing when the right time to say things. It's never the right time to say goodbye. Thank you, Chris. But I think, that's probably something, I don't know if this woman was thinking about that as well, because it was a question from a woman, of like, oh, am I making a big deal out of something? Especially if you're meeting somebody, you're dating, if you're new, it's like, oh, you just started, maybe you met them while they're in transition, like in between churches for whatever reason.
And there is the thing of like, everything else in this relationship is great.
Except for that.
And I ain't trying to rock the boat because I actually really like where this is going. And I think sometimes in dating especially, we forget how much our emotions can come into play in our decision making. Yeah. Now I'll let you keep going because I got more I want to say about that. But
no, please go ahead.
It's just so interesting. But before I get to that point, I do want to say and answer this person's question. What do you do? Like, let's just get straight practical. What do you do with this person? The first thing you want to do is have an honest conversation with them about why going to church is important for you. Yeah. Let's start with you first, because a lot of times we can ask the question of somebody else and just kind of, it could come across the wrong way. It come across like, why don't you go to church? And then all of a sudden they feel attacked. And that may not even be your heart. You may just want to learn about them, but for whatever reason, they may not be able to receive that if you ask them up front. So you could just begin to have a conversation about why church is important to you. And there's a timing for everything, right? So don't be talking about sports or he's talking about something fun and then out of nowhere you bring it up. Yeah. But if you all are already having a conversation about God, maybe you share something that the Lord spoke with you that morning, or maybe you can even share, maybe it's Sunday and you can share what you learned at church or whatever. That can be an opportunity where you can share with them. And that's why I really actually love my church. And that's why I love going to church, is because XYZ. And you explaining your heart first can soften their heart, hopefully, or at least lower the chances of them getting annoyed. When after you explain that and they say what they got to say, then you ask them, I know you said in the past you felt a certain way about church. Why is that? Are you willing to share more about that? I'm really curious. And really just making it about learning. And here's the thing. Any reasonable person that likes you and is in a relationship with you should not automatically get triggered by you asking that question. In my opinion, maybe I'm crazy. What do you think about that?
About asking why somebody feels the way about
church. Is it weird if somebody gets annoyed that you ask them why they don't like or why they have an issue with church?
No. I mean, reactions are big in dating in any conversation. If you ask somebody, like, oh, what was it like for you growing up? Or if somebody mentions, like, oh, I don't know, my dad wasn't in the picture. And it's like, oh, okay, what happened? And if they blow up on you, it's like, oh, it's just curious. Like, it doesn't mean anything. Or, so I think the same thing goes for asking about church. I think it's the only time someone would get triggered is if they're an imposter. If they're trying to, if you met them on Christian Mingle or some type of really churchy, Christian-y front, and they're thinking they have this idea of what you think of them. And if they've kind of done all these acrobatics about how much they read the Bible and how much, into church they are and how much into God they are, and then you start asking them about okay, I understand you're really spiritual or whatever, but you told me about all these pastors that you watch online, but do you go to church in person? And if their reaction, just at all the times, the Bible says that out of the abundance of our heart, the mouth speaks. So if somebody reacts to you about anything, dating or not, church or not, that's going to tell you a lot about them. And a lot of times it's not anything negative or anything you need to run away from. It's just something that you're learning, like you said. And I loved what you mentioned earlier about just having that heart to learn and not coming across kind of interrogative or whatever, because at the end of the day, this is something that you are exploring, and it's not something that you necessarily, that there's a good or bad answer to it, because people have reasons for different things. Now, I'm not saying, if they tell you I don't go to church and I'm okay with that right now, that means okay, maybe they'll change their mind in 6 months. No. But I also think that, it's a conversation, and how you react matters too, because if you're going to be super religious about things, and because people go through stuff, people face abuse and different very manipulative, tough situations, financially, emotionally, obviously physical and sexual abuse from church as well. So you have to be very just sensitive to people. You want to leave the conversation as a friend, worst case scenario, sure, maybe you guys break up and you don't date anymore, but you also don't want to be somebody who's insensitive to whatever someone's trauma may or may not be.
Yeah, 1,000% agree with that. Now, as a woman, which you are, praise God, how would you, as a woman, what would you be looking to hear? So, because obviously this person who asked this, well, not obviously to them, but we know who actually asked this because it was from our webinar this one time. Mm-hmm. But as a woman hearing this question or being in a situation like this, what would you be looking for from a man as far as their response to why they maybe have an issue with church people or the church?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind, or two things that come to mind, are I'd be looking for an actual explanation and a reason, because sometimes guys have this way of answering your question or responding but not answering you.
Oh man,
yeah, saying oh, I love church, I love God, this is what I do to connect with God on a daily, weekly basis. And I'm great, you're still not telling me why you don't go to church on a regular basis. So I was looking for a real explanation of this happened to me, I moved, whatever happened, give me where, have you always not gone, did you used to go, what's the story, and then what caused you to stop, and then what has caused your consistency, or your why has it not been a priority? Were you sick? Was something going on in your family? Tell me what's going on. And if the reason for it is something that, if I can put myself in their shoes and say, okay, I might have made a similar decision, okay, our church attendance is way more scattered these days because we have children and our children get sick and they can't always go to church, and we can't leave them home by themselves. So, like versus 3-5 years ago, I was never missing church, like, ever, for anything, because I wasn't getting sick. I didn't have kids, like, whatever. It was just way different. We still go to church the majority of the time, and if nobody's sick, then we're there. So I'm just putting that on kind of leveling the conversation, where, like, I know what it's like for your church attendance to have changed because life happens, life changes.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I would be looking for outside of an explanation is a plan. So even if things in the past have not been ideal for you, and if you do have some hurt and some trauma, because also, like, your explanation is going to tell me what level of maturity you're at.
That's what I wanted to get to. So talk about that.
So if your reasoning, you explain to me your reason and your explanation as to why you don't go to church, why you haven't been going to church in person. I'm not talking about watching online. That, if you do that, that's great. That's supplemental, and like an additional, kind of practice or habit to build yourself up. But yeah, your reasoning is going to tell me a lot about you, because if it's something practical like sickness, or you travel a lot for work, or your family's been having a lot of celebrations and you've been going to your mom's church, whatever, stuff like that, cool, whatever. So now, but I feel like someone in that situation wouldn't say, hey, I haven't been going to church. They've just been saying, I've just been really busy, I haven't been to church in a while. But to say I don't belong to a church, I don't go to church, I think is a very strong statement. So your explanation is going to tell me a lot about your maturity, where you're at. If it's something along the lines of, somebody said something sideways to me and I was offended, and, XYZ leader did X, Y, and Z, I would definitely be interested in hearing more, not necessarily more about what happened that offended you, either directly or indirectly, but more about, how did you work this out with God? What was God saying to you about this situation? Because there is stuff that's going on in people's churches, and we're very blessed that we haven't gone to a church that's been like kind of tumultuous in a way, I guess. But I mean, people leave and come and go through churches all the time. It's kind of like a normal thing, just like people come and go from jobs and people move. It's okay. But I think that just kind of saying, if you're putting all the blame on somebody else and kind of pointing a finger at this person did this or this person did that, and I wasn't aligned, I didn't rock with that, so I had to leave. I'm hearing you, but I still need to hear more about, like I said.
Can I say it in a way?
Sure.
In my view, if there isn't clear signs of abuse, and they're just giving you this runaround of what you're saying, then that is a sign of a low level of maturity in your faith.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be kind of like confusing for people, because I guess in this day and age, a lot of people don't leave church because they've been abused, like directly. Like they themselves directly experienced abuse.
What's confusing?
Because I think, and maybe it's not confusing, but I think people will be like, is that standard too high? I think for me, I think the explanation is like, whatever the person tells you, you're going to ask your questions so that you feel like you understand their state of mind in that stage and in that period of their life. But also, I think you need to take what they gave you and bring that to God and say, God, what do you think about this?
Well,
was this mature? Was this reasonable?
Let me be clear.
Wise?
I don't mean just the fact that they left for something that isn't abuse is a low level of maturity. What I'm saying is, if they left and decided not to go anywhere after that, strictly based off their feelings were hurt,
yeah,
that shows a low level of maturity. And that may not sound nice or good,
yeah,
but it's the truth. Because if you know that the Bible says, don't abandon meeting together, as is the habit of some people, but encouraging one another, and all the more you'll see the day come drawing near. Like the Bible tells us that we are supposed to gather together.
But that means so many different things to
Does
people.
it?
Yeah, I mean, I get your point of saying, because there's one thing to say, I don't like this restaurant. There were rats in the restaurant. I'm not going back there. Completely reasonable. I don't care. You know, Chipotle still to this day, you know, their reputation is really was really unmarked from all the E. coli and all the stuff that they had years ago. Obviously, they're still operating today. But I think that if anyone says, like, yeah, I just can't do Chipotle, I would respect that and I understand that. But also at the same time, you're going to other restaurants, aren't you? Like, you found a different restaurant to go to, even if you don't like Chipotle. So if you had a bad experience with the church, whatever happened to you directly or indirectly, that doesn't mean you throw away your whole kind of experience and your whole faith and hope in God's church completely.
But what does that have to do with... You said that means a lot of different things. You didn't answer that. How does that mean to you different things of people like meeting together?
Because there are people who, for several reasons, some of them I don't understand, feel as though kind of like doing church at home. Like, oh, like me and my friends and like our families get together and we, you know, kind of have our own church on Sundays. And we don't go to like a formal church in walls. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, sure. That could be viewed as a church if it's a bunch of different families coming together. But I feel like somebody who's asking this question, now we're starting to get into the weeds a little bit, but I feel like somebody who's asking or who's making this statement more oftentimes than not isn't doing that. I'm not talking about somebody who's doing stuff like that. I'm talking about somebody who isn't even watching online, isn't going to church at all. It's just the blanket statement of, you know, church people, that's why I don't go to church type thing. Not, oh, I'm actively in community. That's not what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, one other thing I wanted to hit on is not even... Can we talk about this topic of the last part? It says, I would like for him to visit me at least once. Because that made it seem like you've asked before and they kind of been blowing you off. And
I don't know. I read that as like she's nervous to ask him because of how he feels about church in general.
That's fine. But I'm saying how I read that question, because it wasn't that clear. Mm-hmm. How I read it that, well, maybe you've asked before and they aren't looking. I just want to say, from a non-spiritual perspective, anytime that there's something that you really want somebody to do for you that's not sinful or it's just not an unrealistic expectation of a boyfriend or girlfriend to have of somebody, I would be wary of continuing to be with somebody who isn't willing to put in effort to try to meet something that is important to me.
Yeah.
If I tell you, hey, this is actually really important to me, that you try to reach out to me every day and let me know that you're alive, or hey, it's really important to me that on Fridays we do our best, or once a week we try to have a date night, or it's really important to me, fill in the blank, and somebody just blatantly is not trying to fulfill that, for me, that's a no-go. Because if you're not willing and able to serve me when we're dating, and there's no pressure, there's no bills, there's no kids, at least together, most likely. Mm-hmm. If you can't do that, how can I trust that you're going to be able to serve? Because at the end of the day, we got to remember, a healthy marriage is two people serving one another and being a blessing to one another. If you can't even serve me sacrificially when we're dating and things are easy and fun, how in the world can I trust that you're going to serve me when it's been a long day? You worked, I worked, the kids were acting like kids, and we put them to bed, and now we got to clean up the kitchen. How can I trust that you're not going to leave me down here every night by myself? Like, I know this is getting super practical and in the weeds, but this is real life. Like, there's a practical daily things that go into making a relationship work and not feeling neglected by your partner. And you can forget that example I just gave, but you can imagine that if there's something that they're not willing to do in dating, that what would that look like in marriage over 20, 30, 40 years that you would hope to be married to somebody much longer even? How can I trust that you're going to show up for something else that I care about? Mm-hmm. That's all I would think about. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good way to think about it of like, okay, I'm not asking you to do anything unreasonable. My friends have come to church with me and they're not in a committed relationship with me, and we're not talking about, forever. You invite strangers to come to church with you and they'll come.
And I don't even want to just focus on that, because there's things that you ask me to do and that are important to you that I really don't necessarily want to do, but because I love you, I'm willing to do it, and vice versa.
As a favor, like, if you're a nice person, most of the time somebody asks you to do something, especially they're not asking you for any money or anything. It's like, yeah, sure, I can do this one thing with you. But I also when you were talking, I was more thinking about like, man, like, where are our standards? If we're
please just come to church.
We're women of God and we are,
hey man, they say it's hard out here.
Women of God, I know, and like I try to relate as much as I can because I'm not in that situation. I have friends who are in that situation, but it's still not me, and it's easy to be hopeful when you're young.
Oh, for sure.
And you're in your early 20s about things. And, I just don't know. I guess I just think about, like, if it's hard, like you said, if it's hard to get someone you're dating to go to church with you now, how much harder is it going to be when you're married? And I would even think if I was in this position, I would probably tell myself something like, oh, it would be easier when we're married because then we'll be living together and he can just drive with me and it will be, he'll see me getting ready and, it'll just be kind of an easier...
Have fun.
It'll just be an easier kind of go with the flow.
About to watch this game.
It's kind of the same thing of like, oh, if I'm making eggs and I'm like, hey, do you want some eggs? And you're like, oh, if you're already making them, yeah, just throw some in for me type of thing. And you're taking, you're doing the work for me in a way. Or I'm doing work for you. But yeah, it's really not that way. So it's really tough. But yeah, I want us to believe for more. And I just wonder if God wants the same for her and for other people in this situation where it's like, I know you really want to be married. And I know you love me. I see what you have done for me. And I want that area of your life too. And I know that it's hard to believe me and to wait on me. But it'll be worth it. Even if it means longer period of singleness. I'm not even saying that, oh, if you give up this guy who is really not on the same level as you, I'll give you a guy that's better. But it's like, what if singleness with God is better than marriage without God? And kind of really asking ourselves these questions, because sometimes I don't know the woman personally who asked this question and like, what her situation is, but I just think sometimes it's so tempting for us to try to evade and escape from loneliness, and people think loneliness and singleness are the same, and it's really not. And I don't even say that in a sense of like, oh, you don't need a man. I think it's more of a sense of just quality is really, really important. And if the quality is already showing, if the preview is not good,
movie trash.
Exactly. The trailer is not good. The whole movie is just gonna be terrible, and you're gonna be sitting there like, I wasted my time, my money, and I don't want you to feel that way about marriage. And I think people's hearts can change, and God can and does change people every day, but sometimes it doesn't happen until after we surrender.
Yeah, that's really good. So please hear our hearts. Whether you are a man or a woman and you find yourself, if you ever find yourself in this type of situation, we're not saying that it has to be an automatic deal breaker, but we're saying it has to be an automatic conversation.
Yeah.
You have to at least have the conversation with them, learn their heart, and then if they say that they are willing to get back committed into church, to seek the Lord about healing their heart when it comes to church people, quote unquote, and whatever rejection or anger or bitterness that they may feel there, take that, give it a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then see if there's any actionable change. Because you don't just want to have them say they're going to do something. You want to have to see them actually do it. And one thing that you really need, especially depending on how far along this relationship is, if you haven't even really started dating this person, then you may really want to steer clear. But if y'all already dating and there's high emotions already involved, please get some people that you view as mentors, or some people that you view as really strong friends who are really strong in their faith. Mm-hmm. Get them on board to help you walk through the situation and help you identify if what they said is matching up with what they're doing. Because sometimes when we're in a relationship and we really like somebody, we can hear people say things, and then we can make believe in our mind that they're actually doing something different. Yeah. When in reality, they never changed. They just said what you wanted to hear. And since you heard what you wanted to hear, you're going to decide to look the other way or make excuses. Oh, well, they couldn't go. It was raining. Or, man, something happened and that's why they ain't been to church. And it's like, nah, bro, they ain't been to church because they don't want to come to church. Yeah. And even though they told you they would, that was just lip service. Yeah. So that's just something you want to be mindful of. And we're telling you it's going to be really hard to do that by yourself. You got to involve other people in a situation like this if you find yourself in it. Yeah. So, we hope you've been encouraged. We hope that this was not discouraging. But know that the Lord is with you. Mm-hmm. No matter where you find yourself, single, dating, engaged. He will order your steps if you choose to submit to him. And me and Pauline were having a very real situation before we even recorded the podcast. I'm not going to go into detail, don't worry. But I think sometimes we can forget that just because a situation is hard, that doesn't mean that God isn't in it. That doesn't mean that that's not where you're supposed to be. Like, maybe it's supposed to be a little bit hard right now because the Lord's trying to do something in your character. I don't know. But that's when you need to seek the Lord the most. So if this was discouraging for some people, because it wasn't for everybody listening, but if it was, take that to the Lord. The Bible says that we can cast our cares on him because he cares. And he wants you to come to him, because this is how your relationship with him is going to grow and get stronger. And if you're watching this podcast, you're most likely somebody who wants to have a close relationship with the Lord. So use this as an example, or an opportunity rather, to be able to do that. And we'll see you next week on the W Podcast.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this video.
To get more Christian relationship advice, subscribe to our channel.
And make sure you check out our other videos as well.